So, have you ever stopped to think about what your driver's license is going to look like in, say, 10 years? It's probably not going to be a piece of plastic. The entire world is moving towards digital IDs. Now, this technology promises some incredible efficiency. But, and this is a big but, there's a huge debate brewing around it. Are these systems the ultimate convenience, or are they the ultimate tool for surveillance? Let's get into it and break down exactly what's at stake.
And really, this is the core question, isn't it? On one side, you can imagine a world with zero fraud and totally seamless access to everything. But on the other, you've got a world where your every move is tracked and your rights, well, they could be turned on or off like a light switch. We're going to explore both of these possible futures, but let's start by looking at the potential dangers first.
You know, privacy advocates actually have a name for the dark side of government-led digital IDs. They call it the mass spy thesis. And look, this isn't just one single problem. It's actually a set of 4 interconnected risks that could totally redefine the relationship between you and the state.
So let's dive into each of these 4 risks, one by one, to really understand how they all connect and why this is such a big deal.
Okay, first up is what's called the metadata of existence. Think about your physical ID card for a second. It just sits there in your wallet, right? It's passive. A digital ID, though, is active. Every single time you use it, whether you're buying a drink, getting on a plane, or logging into a website, it has to check in with a central server to get verified. And each one of those check-ins creates a tiny digital breadcrumb, a little record of your activity.
And this is what that leads to. All those little breadcrumbs, the timestamps, your locations, who you're with, they can all be pieced together. The worry here is that this allows a government to build a shockingly detailed map of your entire life. They can track your movements, your connections, all in real time, and it's all happening in the background without any need for a warrant.
The second risk is something called programmable rights. Because these IDs are digital and they're controlled from a central point, they can be changed, they can be updated, or they could even be suspended, all done remotely and instantly. What this does is it transforms your identity from a stable, predictable right into a privilege that's based on your behavior. And this is where it gets really serious. Critics argue this creates a potential kill switch for your life. Just imagine being locked out of your bank account, public transit, maybe even the grocery store, all because you went to a protest or you fell behind on your taxes. Your access to society could, in theory, just be frozen with the flip of a switch.
All right, next up, security. Think about this. Putting every single citizen's most sensitive data, and we're talking biometrics here, like your face scan and your fingerprints, into one single government database, well, that creates the ultimate target for hackers. Security experts have a term for this. They call it a centralized honeypot.
And that's what makes this particular risk so terrifying. If your password gets stolen, what do? You change it, right? It's annoying, but you move on. But if a biometric hash, which is just a digital signature of your face or your fingerprint, gets leaked, it is compromised forever. You can't just go out and get a new face. The damage is permanent.
So the final risk is something called function creep. If you look at history, surveillance tools almost never stick to their original stated purpose. A system that starts out with a really specific, often popular goal has a tendency to expand its scope over time, little by little.
And you can almost see the path it would take. A digital ID that's introduced for something totally straightforward, like vaccine verification, could easily expand to handle tax filing. From there, well, it could be linked to social credit systems, and eventually it might even be used for predictive policing, touching literally every part of your life.
Okay, so those are the major risks. It's a pretty sobering picture, I know. But what's the alternative? Well, there is one. It's called self-sovereign identity. And it's a completely different way of thinking about this whole thing.
The core idea here is actually simple, but it's totally revolutionary. Instead of your identity being granted and managed by a government or some other big institution, you own and control it yourself. You hold the keys. You get to decide what information gets shared and who gets to see it. The power fundamentally shifts from the institution back to you, the individual.
So you might be wondering, how is that even possible? Well, a key piece of the technology that makes this work is called a zero-knowledge proof. The best way to think about it is like this. Imagine you need to prove you have a secret key to a room, but you do it without ever actually showing the key to anyone. It lets you prove a fact, like I am over 21, without revealing the sensitive data behind it, like your exact birthday.
Let's use that classic example, buying alcohol. The old way, you hand over your ID, and you end up sharing way too much personal data. Your name, your address, everything. With a self-sovereign system, like the Linkspreed UIID, your phone simply gives a cryptographic yes or no answer
to the only question that actually matters. Is this person over 18? That's it. Your name, your address, your birth date, none of it is ever exposed.
This whole system works using something called a vault and alias architecture. So step 1, your most sensitive info, your biometrics, your legal name, it all lives in an encrypted vault right on your own device, not on some government server. Then, for every different website or service you use, the system creates a unique, disposable alias. And what that means is that a social media company can't link your identity to your bank because you're using two totally different aliases that can't be traced back to each other, and more importantly, they can't be traced back to you. And instead of having one central server that everyone has to check in with, this model uses a decentralized network. This completely eliminates that honeypot risk we were talking about earlier. There's no single point of failure and no single entity, not even the people who created the system, can censor you or just decide to turn off your identity.
So all of this brings us to a really crucial choice. And this isn't just some technical debate about software. It's a fundamental decision about the kind of society we actually want to build for ourselves.
I mean, just look at the two paths. They could not be more different. On the left, you've got the centralized model where the state issues your identity and you're just a passive user. On the right, the self-sovereign model where you are the active owner. Transparent to the government versus encrypted and private. Continuous real-time tracking versus none at all. A fragile centralized target versus a resilient decentralized network.
And this is not a small issue. As one expert put it, this whole fight is going to define privacy and autonomy for generations to come. It really is about whether the internet remains a tool for individual empowerment or becomes an instrument of control.
Which brings us to our final question for you. Are we going to move towards a future of glass-box citizenship, where all of our lives are completely transparent to authority? Or are we going to build the tools for a digital cloak, one that preserves our privacy and our autonomy in a digital age? That choice is being made right now.